Pray with me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight. O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. The world of God is not a contest to be won. So Jesus is eating with the Pharisees. That's actually kind of a big deal. Who you eat with expresses who you think is your equal. That's why these same Pharisees were always so baffled, to put it gently, that Jesus would eat with tax collectors and sinners and just about anyone deemed unworthy by his world. And we like to criticize the Pharisees for it, reasonably. But we often paint them as villains. After all, they're exaggerated in the Gospels. They're set up to be God's foil in the story. And yet Jesus eats with them too. It's the first step to resolving deep division, sharing a meal, looking eye to eye, and remembering that we are all children of God, no matter what. The world of God is not a contest to be won. So it's at this dinner, a Sabbath evening dinner, a holy time, a way to mark the rituals of the week, to treasure company, to remember freedom, to think on God together. At this dinner, en route to it, in fact, Jesus encounters a man who needs some healing, and he heals him. No questions asked, at least not of the man. He does ask one of the Pharisees. He asks, is this healing the kind of work that is prohibited by Sabbath laws? Or it is a good that must be done for one who is also a child of God? It's after this journey that Jesus tells the parable we just heard. Now, maybe you've planned a wedding before. Maybe you have agonized over the seating arrangements for weeks in advance, trying to make sure that everyone gets their place just right. No family feuds at a single table, no acrimonious breakups, limit the politics conflicts, keep people interested in each other's hobbies. It's a lot to think about. But you did it. You put in the work. Maybe you were like us and you assigned no seats ahead of time so that you wouldn't have to spend time agonizing over it for weeks. Either way, you may know from experience or from stories that seating can be awkward. In Jesus' day, it was an honor to sit nearer to the host, a very public one. You were seen seated next to this generous host, and people wanted that public honor. It made them feel good, treasured, important, and they got to be seen, see everybody around them, be seen by everyone around them, sitting at the high table, looking important. We all kind of like it every once in a while. So it was very easy to be tempted to run straight to the front of the hall when you first arrived at a feast. But Jesus reminds them that's not really how it's supposed to work. Your host probably has in mind, long beforehand, who he wants to sit at that high table. And if you rush in and take those seats, maybe your host won't do anything about it. But maybe he will, and then you look like a jerk. Your host is going to say, hey, no, you in the back, you were supposed to sit next to me. And then if you were sitting there, all of a sudden, your goal of being publicly honored suddenly becomes publicly watching everybody else stare at you while you trade seats with the guy in the back. It's just awkward. And then by contrast, Jesus says, the person who was just invited forward gets even more public honor. Because everyone already seated watches that person move to the front. And then the same goes for the invite list too, Jesus adds, which is a little bit of a brazen thing to say to the guy who just invited you to dinner. He says, don't invite your friends who can afford to return the favor. Invite people who can't, but who need the food more. Invite the outcasts who need a good meal, and more than that, good company, who need the freedom that is proclaimed by the Sabbath rest. Invite them, Jesus says, because then you will get a better reward at the end of it all. Now it's practical advice. The first one's even a proverb, like Proverbs book proverb. But then there's that kind of bit, that sneaking in the end bit that's like, just do it for your reward. That feels kind of uncomfy. Feels a little self-serving. Feels a little not Jesus-y. But it's there. So what do we do with it? God's world isn't a contest to be won, right? So what do we do with it? Now, the letter to the Hebrews that we heard is written for a similar audience. These are faithful Jews who, since Jesus' time, have also become Christians, but they haven't sworn off any of their old traditions. They haven't disavowed their heritage. They think about Jesus in terms of the prophets and the law, in terms of the high priesthood and the Passover. They understand the world much in the same way that these Pharisees Jesus is eating with understood it. And the advice that is given to them in this letter goes like this. Focus on mutual love. Mutual, the give and take, helping and receiving help, because through that you build community. And it explains how. How do you do mutual love? One, by being welcoming, because you never know when God will show up through your guests somehow. Two, by remembering those who are suffering, not just with your thoughts and prayers, but genuinely imagining what it's like to be where they are. What it must feel like to go through what they're going through. Grieve with them, suffer with them, because that is how we learn what could genuinely change the world for the better. 3, by focusing on upholding our oaths to one another, because covenants mean something, and it's true. Humans aren't perfect. Sometimes they do break, but we do our best. 4, by keeping our minds more on what we have than what we could get. More on community than capital, more on people than profit. Love of money, it says, leads us away from each other and from God. And why these 4 things? Why this kind of mutual love? Because this is what it looks like to genuinely trust God as your helper, the writer says. Not just in theory, but in practice. And that word helper, that would have meant something to this audience. That's the word that's used for Eve in the creation of humans. It's the explanation for why Adam needs someone else. He needs a helper who can meet him face to face. It's actually hard to translate the Hebrew. but it's something like that. A helper who can meet him face to face. That's who God is for us, this passage says. In fact, that word is used for God more than anyone else in the Bible. A helper, a partner, our closest bond, who walks beside us, stands face to face with us, loves us. This is the way of Christ. This letter writer says, you trust God, your helper, and you build community, and you follow good advice from those who have gone before you in faith. Do not neglect to do good and to share what you have, it concludes. Because the world of God is not a contest to be won. I think this is the real reason Jesus tells these parables this way. I mean, sure, he's playing a bit on the natural human selfishness, but it's more than that. It's not just do this for your own benefit. He's teaching them how to feel, I think. How to feel like others feel. How to understand what their actions do, how they can build up or tear down community. Because when they sit at the high table without asking first, they tear apart those bonds with each other. They tear down those whom the host wanted to honor. When they invite those who cannot repay them their dinner, they build up community and share what they have with those who don't have enough. Because God's world isn't a contest to be won. There's not more people than honor to go around. There's not more people than love, more people than grace or abundant life. Not here. Not in God's world. The good news of Christ is that the world of God is different than the stories we so often hear. It's not a place of contest, but a place of community. It's not a place of zero-sum games, but of sharing meals, sharing resources, sharing honor. And all are invited to this feast. Thanks be to God. Amen.